If you have been paying attention to the news or the recent media postings about the National Association of Realtors class action settlement, often referred to as NAR settlement, you probably have some questions about what exactly is going on, because you've seen headlines all over the place that actually are really misconstruing what this settlement is. So I want to dig into this video, let you know exactly what's going on and how it's going to affect you whether you're buying or selling a home in the near future. Hey, I'm Adam D with the Local Connect and KW Realty. In this video, we're going to be talking about the NAR settlement. So if you're not familiar, NAR is the National Association of Realtors. And this settlement is based off of a class action lawsuit. And just to be clear, I'm not an attorney. This settlement has not yet been ratified, which means NAR has made a proposal of changes and the courts have not signed off or accepted it yet. So nothing is official, and for some reason, a lot of the media headlines you see out there make it as if there's been some major changes. And there may be some major changes upcoming, but here's what this proposal looks like and how it may affect you. So there's a number of changes in the proposal. Some of them only realtors would notice. Some of them are going to be more out in the public that you may notice. So there's really two changes that I want to focus on that I think is going to affect people the most and is what's really media is focusing on, and this is what's going to change your experience when you're buying or selling. Change number one I want to discuss. As it has stood, the compensation offered to an agent or broker that represents a buyer was available in the MLS. So for example, you're selling your home, you list with a real estate agent, and you have a conversation with that agent about how much of compensation you're going to offer to the agent who represents the buyer. That number, or percentage often, is listed in the MLS and all of the real estate agents can see it. Well, that's going away. There's not going to be any public offering of compensation in the MLS that the real estate agents can see. Now, as a seller, you can still offer compensation, and the agents are going to have to find other means to share that with the other agents that might be representing a buyer. You certainly can do it by phone call or text. They might be able to set up their own portal or website. There's going to be other options. It's just not going to be in the MLS any longer. So I'll dig a bit more into that. But change number two is if you are a buyer, you must now, with these proposed changes, and by the way, the proposed changes are to take effect in mid-July for everything I'm discussing here. Now, this may change again. But if you're a buyer, now before you look at homes and start working with a real estate agent, you must sign what's called a buyer representation agreement or a buyer broker agreement. And that agreement is going to outline the agent's responsibilities, your responsibilities as a client, and how the agent gets compensated. Who's going to compensate them, how much, what happens, etc., etc. And this is a big change for our industry because as it has stood, a lot of times buyers will call a real estate agent and say, hey, I want to look at house XYZ. Can you meet me there and show it to me? A lot of agents have done that on short notice without even knowing the client. Well, it seems as if come July, maybe even before, some agents may start implementing this practice. But once July comes, it's going to be a requirement as it stands right now that you're going to have a consultation with a buyer and the real estate agent and go over this buyer representation agreement. And it's going to have to be signed by the buyer before you look at any houses and have any relationship whatsoever with the real estate agent. So it may really change the process, and we may not have those, hey, I'm on my way down to the shore today. I want to see this house in an hour or two. It might just not be possible anymore, or you have to be prepared that you're going to be signing this representation agreement before you go into the home. So let's talk how these changes may affect you if you're buying a home, for example. So if you're a buyer, you're going to have to sign this representation agreement, right? And the representation agreement will give a few options depending on also what the seller is doing as far as compensation for the real estate agent that's representing you. So by signing that agreement, you're hiring an agent to represent you, and you're also going to know up front how much the compensation for that agent is. Now becomes a question, who's going to pay? And there may be a scenario where the seller is offering compensation that pays the agent, or you as the buyer may pay the agent, or the seller may not be offering anything, but as the buyer, you give your agent the right to negotiate their payment and have the seller pay it, or give a credit to you as the buyer to offset the payment or the compensation to the agent. All of this is going to be outlined in the representation agreement, and even further is going to be in the contract of sale if there's any credits or if the seller is paying the agent, for example. All this can change. It's fully negotiable as far as compensation and what's going to happen in a contract of sale. This just becomes another term in the contract, like purchase price or closing date, for example. But what needs to be really clear to a buyer, which very rarely happened in the past, which may happen more frequently in the future, is if the seller is unwilling to pay, for whatever reason, the buyer representation, then you as the buyer will be paying that representation cost, or whatever the agreed upon fee is for the real estate agent that's representing you as a buyer. So there is a chance that your closing costs, or the cost to purchase a home, if you have realtor representation, may be significantly higher than it was before. It's something we're gonna really keep a close eye on to see how this affects the market and buyers in the market. Now, if you're a seller and you're selling your home, this is how it may affect you and the things you have to think about. Now, commission's always been negotiable, and the options that are available to you have always been available to you, but they may be a little bit more clear at this point, and the agents may be asking you these questions a little bit more specifically. So you really have three options when you're listing your home for sale when we talk about compensation. You can authorize your agent to offer a compensation and pay for the buyer agent representation as well. This exposes your home to the most amount of buyers and the most amount of real estate agents, because keep in mind, not every buyer may be able to pay their agent, and they may instruct their agent, don't show me homes that offer no compensation for my agent. So option number one is you authorize your agent to offer a fee to buyers, agents, the representation for the buyer. Option number two is you leave it negotiable. You let your agent know that I'm not putting a specific fee or percentage out there, but I'm open to negotiation. So when the buyer makes their offer, they can put their fee into the offer, and I'll either accept or decline it at that time. And option number three is you do not offer and do not approve any fee to the buyer's broker or buyer representation at all. You just simply will not authorize it. And now this may limit the number of buyers available for your property and could even decline prices or values. So it's something, again, to keep an eye on, but it's certainly your right as a seller or homeowner to not offer that compensation. But what you have to think about is what's in your best interest with these options. And hopefully, if you have a really good agent, they're going to go through these different options with you and come up with a plan which would be most beneficial to you and make sure that you're selling your home for the most amount of money. So that's a look at how these changes may affect you in the near future. Again, as of right now, they anticipate these changes will be in place in mid-July. That could get pushed back, or there may be agents that start to implement this even sooner to get ahead of the deadline. Now let's dig a little bit into the misconceptions, the media headlines that you may have seen, and get to the facts to learn whether these headlines are true, false, or maybe somewhere in the middle. I think the most common misconception we're seeing is that the realtor fee or the standard fee is abolished and fees have come down. I've seen a number of different headlines. There has been no change to fees. Real estate brokers can charge any fee they would like, and clients can agree, disagree, negotiate those fees. There are many different real estate brokers that all offer different fees. And as a client, it's up to you whether you want to agree to work with that broker or find a broker that offers a different fee structure if you can't come to an agreement with them. So there's never been a set fee. There's many different fees in real estate transactions, different brokers, and different business models. And so I think this is the most misleading headline to say that the fixed fee or the standard fee or anything as such has been abolished, because it's simply false. Another misconception I'm seeing in headlines is that the seller no longer has to pay the buyer broker by law. Again, this one is also false. So as a seller, you were never required, and you still are not required, to pay the buyer representation or the agent that represents the buyer. Now, it's been very common that sellers have paid that fee because they found it in their best interest to expose the property to as many buyers and therefore their agents as possible. But you were never required to do so, and you're still not required to in the future. This is something, again, to think about what would be in your best interest and what are you agreeable to. All fees will be disclosed to you up front, and you know exactly how much it's going to cost you in representation in the agreements that you sign ahead of time. Another headline I saw was that home prices will decline as a result of these changes. Well, I can't say yet if this is true or false, but I can tell you I strongly disagree with it, because I've never seen a fee, or even interest rates for that matter, affect real estate values. The value of real estate is simply supply and demand. Economic principle of supply and demand. If there's more supply, prices go down. If there's more demand or less supply, prices go up. Now, there is a chance that these changes affect demand and thereby supply. For example, if the seller no longer offers to pay the representation for the buyer broker, well, that could increase supply by causing more homes to sit on the market longer. But I don't think that just this change alone is going to bring down prices. Even if the fee to sell your house comes down, I don't think that price is going to come down. If a seller, for example, pays less in fees, if that were to happen, doesn't mean that they're going to bring their price down because they're paying less in fees. I've always known it that sellers are going to sell for the most amount of money that they can that achieves their goals, and there are other criteria or reasons for selling. Usually sellers don't want to just give their house away for less than what market value is. So it's unlikely that home prices come down unless there's some other market condition, again, think supply and demand, that would increase supply or lower demand, which would cause prices to come down. Here's another that I saw. Closing costs will be significantly lower going forward. Well, this one's very questionable because as it has stood, the majority of real estate transactions, the buyer did not have to pay the agent who represented them. The seller did. Now, it remains to be seen, but if it becomes common practice that the buyer has to pay their representation, well, then the cost, at least for the buyer, is going to increase, and probably rather significantly. So the big concern here is, are buyers going to have the funds to pay an additional significant closing cost that they did not have to pay for before? So these new rules could actually increase costs, not lessen them. Again, remains to be seen. We'll see how this all shakes out in the coming months and years. And the last misleading headline I saw was that people who sold their home in recent history will experience some type of windfall or be compensated because of this class action lawsuit. Well, I read a few different articles on it, and most of the consensus was that this class of home sellers, after the attorneys collect their 30 to 40% on the settlement, it'll end up being about $10 per seller as a result of this hundreds of millions of dollars in class action lawsuits that maybe a homeowner gets $10 if they sold their house. If you can get it, great. But again, I don't see any significant windfall based off of the articles I've been reading and the data that I've been looking at. I hope that this video can shed a little bit of light on the recent proposed changes for this NAR settlement. And again, nothing is official yet. Nothing has changed. Everything is the norm at this time. And I'm sure there will be additional changes that come up. And so I'm going to continue to update these videos and blog posts as more changes become apparent. But for right now, this is what we know. And the next change that comes up, make sure you're notified. So please hit the subscribe button for that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. My contact information is below. I'm Adam D with the Local Connect and KW Realty, and I'll see you on the next video.